Let's begin today with a prayer preparation. Lord, as we come now to hear your living word, we pray that you might open our minds and hearts to what we can truly be thankful for. Help us to understand more deeply and with greater sincerity the wonderful gifts that you have given us. Take away the despair from our hearts. Take away all of the feelings of anxiousness and worry that we might have, Lord, and remind us once again of how thankful we should be and how we can rejoice in that thanksgiving. Amen.
Amen.
Well, now I shall begin another 4-part series of sermons exactly on this topic of what we should be thankful for in this world. Being thankful is a very tricky thing. Many times we are thankful for things that we really ought not to be thankful for. I had a lot of time on our trip because we took many flights, and I was able to do something I'm not able to do very often, and that was on my little phone computer. I was able to play chess. I love to play chess, but I never have time to do that. And it'd been a while, so I started on the beginner level. That was easy, I thought, and I lost the first 3 games. But eventually I got better, and I was thankful for that. I went on to the intermediate level, and I lost 4 or 5 games. But finally I challenged the computer in such a way that I was able to win a game there. And then I went on up to the advanced level, and I think after 10 or 15 games or whatever, I finally won one. And how thankful I was that I got to go on to the hard level. They don't call it hard just for fun. I never did win a game on that level, even though I was so thankful. But the point I'm making here is that many times the things that we are thankful for are not the things we really should be thankful for. And I think in Christianity today, as well as it is in the whole world today, we've kind of forgotten what we need to be thankful for. Because that is the root of all the great life we can offer this world. Is if we really understand what we are to be thankful for and how thankful we are to be for it. So the next 4 Sundays I want to cover some of what I consider to be God's greatest gifts to us. The things that God gives us for which we should truly be thankful. The foods that God gives us. The faith that God has in us. The fellowship we have with God. And the familyship we have with God. These 4 things I wish to discuss with you over the next 4 Sundays. And today being a Sunday in which we focus upon the foods of God, we'll start with that. We'll start with the idea of being thankful for the foods of God. And I'd like to focus upon this gospel passage that we read earlier today. It's the famous story of the prodigal son, or the lost son, who finally comes to his senses, it says, and realizes that after he had wasted all of his father's inheritance, and after he had found himself in a world that was no longer what he had hoped it might be, he finally came to his senses and said, how many of my father's hired servants have food to spare, and yet here I am starving? That's what I see in the world today. I see a world that is starving, not due to the lack of physical food, though there are many places where that also is a major problem as well. But what I see is a world in which people's souls are starving for something greater than what they see in this world. For something beyond the darkness, the terror, and all the other things that we see daily on our news nowadays. As on our trip we went through Argentina and through Chile, we saw people that looked like they were starving even though they had plenty to eat. They had no meaning, no purpose. They were in chaos. They were confused. Both of these great nations were going through turmoil over their governments and how things should be or should not be. We saw the fires in Chile. We saw the riots in Argentina. We saw all of that because we could see how in this world, not just in South America, but all over this world, people are starving for something more, something greater than what this world has given them. And so today we want to focus not on the physical foods that God makes available for us, which is great, and we want to give thanks for that as well. But what I want people to understand, and what I want us to understand, is that we need to be thankful for the great spiritual foods that we are given. I have 2 points that this morning I'd like to say about that. The first point is simply this. We need to remember that God's food is always available to us. We may run out of physical food. We may find ourselves in a starving situation physically, but we should never, ever, ever find ourselves starving spiritually. But we have a Father God, we have a God who gives us all that we might need spiritually, all the time, in any place we might find ourselves. And then the second point I would like to make about it is simply the idea that the food God gives us is truly satisfying food. It is food that satisfies the soul. It is food that comforts our hearts. And not to partake of it is kind of the silliest thing in the world we could do. The prodigal son in our story discovered both of these great truths. When he realized that he had wasted his life, he remembered that his father was still there. His father was still there and still willing to welcome him to his home, to welcome him back to where the food was good and the living was wonderful. And likewise, once he went back to that situation, he learned once again that even though he thought he could find a better food, even though he thought he could find a better life, he finally realized that only in the hands of the loving God did he find the food he truly needed to calm his soul and strengthen his mind and heart. So these are the 2 points I wish to make. But now comes the issue of illustrating. And I like to illustrate what I believe are these truths from the gospel using the stories and events of my life. Because I think if we see our lives as parables, we will learn a lot from God about what God has in mind for us to understand. Amen. And when I go on these trips, I often look for many, many stories that I can come back and share with you of how God had communicated certain things to me. And I do have a long list, enough to go for the next 2 years, perhaps. But I intend upon taking another vacation before then. So I have plenty to share with you. But today I have 2 events that I would like to share with you, 2 experiences we had. Each of them illustrates, I believe, kind of clearly how we need to understand how thankful we should be for these foods that God gives us. The first one, actually both of them, come from experiences we had in a beautiful part of Argentina that's called San Carlos de Bariloche. It's known as the Switzerland of Argentina. And let me tell you, it is a beautiful, beautiful place. I would like to describe it as a combination of the Teton Mountains, Finger Lakes, the lakes of Minnesota, and all of Switzerland put together in one place. Wow. It is breathtaking. At every vista, you just can't stop holding your mouth open looking at it. So we went there to enjoy the beautiful nature that we saw. We took a ferry out to an island in the middle of this huge crystal blue glacier lake that the town sits right on the bay of. The name of that lake is Nuahuape, and it means big lake. And I can tell you, it was a big lake. But anyway, we took a ferry ride out to an island on the north end of that lake, an island which was called Isla de Victoria. And we went hiking on that island. And what a beautiful place. Fragrant, tall pine trees everywhere. Beautiful paths for you to walk down. And as you look through the pines, every direction, this way, back that way. What did you see? Lakes and snow-capped mountains. Everywhere you looked, it was just like walking through a postcard, actually. But anyway, we came to an opening. And in that opening, it was like, I describe it as if you were walking into the auditorium of God. It was like the most beautiful setting I had ever seen in my entire life, and I've been many, many places in this world. A huge lake stretched out before us, completely surrounded by so many snow-capped mountains you could not even begin to count all of them. And this was on a beautiful day. Blue sky, warm sun shining, a nice little gravel beach there. And we decided if ever there was a place to have a picnic, this was it. And so we had packed a picnic lunch, and we sat down to enjoy it there. You've probably figured out by now, the picture I was taken of me sitting there is on the front of your program today. That's the lake, and that's me sitting there enjoying my picnic. Unfortunately, I did not have a wide-angle lens to take in the whole beauty of it all. But what a great place it was to sit, and so quiet. So quiet. Not another soul there, not another noise, not another anything, just quiet. And so there we were, sitting there enjoying our picnic. I was enjoying my picnic. Rebecca had met some people from California and went off to talk to them. And that's okay. I enjoyed my quietness there. And I was munching on my potato chips. You see them in the picture. Crunchy, crunchy, crunchy. That was the only sound you could hear. Crunchy, crunchy, crunchy. And then I noticed there was another sound. It was the sound of the lake lapping on the shore. And I even quit eating my potato chips to listen to it. And it was an amazing sound. I've heard lakes lapping on shores before. But because of the gentleness of this lake, I guess, and because of the absence of any civilization, this lake was in a situation of total uniformity. And so the water came up to the shore, and it made a 3-part sequence. Lap, lap, lap. Lap, lap, lap. That was very, very calming. It really gave peace to my soul to listen to that. And I just was mesmerized there as I listened to it. But then I looked up at the lake, and across the lake was flying this beautiful white bird. And I noticed that the white bird was flying in synchronicity to the lapping. Thrust wing, thrust wing, thrust. It was an amazing thing to see that. Lap, lap, lap. Thrust, thrust, thrust. Together they were doing that. And as I was watching that, I started eating my sandwich that way. Chew, chew, chew. Swallow. Now, I can imagine you're thinking how much wine had your pastor drunk. But actually, I had not had a drop. No. It was just this beautiful, synchronized dance of nature in this trinity. Lap, 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 thrust, thrust, thrust. And as I went into a deeper meditation, thinking upon the ways of God, I realized that what I was actually seeing was not just a lake with a bird going across. I was hearing the very voice of God speak. Love, peace, joy. Love, peace, joy. You see, God is speaking to us every day in every way. And that message is coming through the Holy Trinity of God's message about the foods He offers us. Love, peace, joy. You can have these anytime, any place, anywhere you might need them. These foods are available. Love without condition. Peace beyond understanding. Joy regardless of circumstances. That's something to be thankful for. Yeah. That's something to be able to say, praise God, I can have this food anytime, any place I might need it. But here I was out in this isolated place, alone there, sitting on the shore, listening to that sound over and over again. And I realized I would move on. I would go back to Cuenca and all of this. But even though I'm here today, I can bet you, on the Isle of Victoria, near Carlos San Bariloche, that sound continues. Lap, lap, lap. And that's the sound we need to hear in our world today. We need to hear, the world needs to hear more than anything else, that we are loved beyond any condition, that we can have peace beyond any understanding, and that we can find joy regardless of the circumstances we face. No matter how difficult the day might be, no matter how difficult the world in which we live might be, we have a shore we can sit on and feel the love and the peace and the joy in the midst of the chaos that our world today goes on with. This is what's missing in people's lives. All they can do is watch what they see on TV. All they can do is see what they see in the streets. All they can do is worry about what they're told they should worry about. But what we all need to do, and what I would encourage each and every one of you to do, is to not get sucked into that. That kind of thinking that fills us with distress, that makes us think that the world is really going to hell in the handbasket. That kind of thinking that makes us think that darkness is going to be victorious. That kind of thinking does nothing for our hearts, does nothing for our souls, and it certainly does not feed us in any way. But to be able to just close your eyes and imagine that you're sitting in the auditorium of God and hearing from God that you can have this love, you can have this peace, you can have this joy. Oh, that feeds your soul, and it inspires you. It inspires you not to be able to be sucked into those pig pens where you find yourself starving because what the world offers is not meaningful to your heart, your soul, or your mind. So that's the first experience I wish to share with you today. It was an experience of hearing the truth that God's love, peace, and joy is always available. Don't let anybody tell you it's not. Don't let anything that happens in this world make you think that it's not. Whatever we might face as a community, whatever we might face as the world, God is with us. He didn't just take a vacation and go away. God is here, right here. And anytime you need love, the love is there. Anytime you need peace, peace is there. Anytime you need joy, joy is there. Feed upon it, and be full and content and rejoice and be thankful. This is the correct attitude of the Christian in the world in which we live today. Now, the second experience, the second thought I have for you today, also occurred in this same beautiful area of San Carlos de Bariloche. The next day, we took a tour of a road that leads us along an area which is called the Road of the Seven Lakes. You know, the day before I thought I'd seen the most beautiful lake and I thought I had experienced the most wonderful place. But when we went on that tour, it was also amazingly unbelievable. There are 7 lakes that lead up to a beautiful little town on the edge of a lake, which is called San Miguel de los Andes. And as you go, they stop at each of these lakes. And each of these lakes, with the snow-capped mountains around them and the tall pine trees, are even more beautiful than the one before. And to stand there and take pictures is like being inside of a postcard. And it was such an inspiration to go through all of that. But we got up to the little town, and we had a lovely lunch there and looked around and enjoyed that place. And then it was time to head all the way back to Bariloche. So we all began to get into the van. Well, we picked up a new passenger. I was interested about that. The new passenger was a young woman who, obviously, as I studied the situation, was the wife of the driver of the van. She had been in San Miguel de los Andes visiting relatives. And so she was getting a ride back home with her husband, who was the driver. And she was carrying in her arm their infant little baby. And so she got on the van and sat on the right-hand side of where I was sitting, one seat up. And we took off. And on the way back, it was even more beautiful than on the way up, because the sun was setting, you see. And it was coming across those mountains. And each time we passed a lake, the sun was a little bit lower and a little bit lower. And so the glow of the sun and the blue sky was just breathtaking. And of course, I had to look out the right side. And as I was looking at that, I noticed the little one was beginning to squirm. He was not happy with where he was. And I thought to myself, oh my goodness, I bet in a minute he's going to start crying. And you know what? He did. And he struggled against his mother. She was holding him in her arms, had a blanket around him. And he just struggled his head back, and he struggled like this. And I felt sorry for her because I knew what was about to happen. He was going to be wailing and wailing, and all of us on the bus, a small bus, we're going to be listening to that. But the mother was wise, and she understood what was going on with her infant. And she had the blanket over her shoulder, and so she was able to unbutton her blouse and begin to breastfeed the little one. All I could see was his head, curly, curly hair, and his little eyes. And his face was so content. He was not struggling anymore. At first he did struggle against what she was offering him. He was not really sure he wanted to get engaged in that. But the memory kicked in of how delicious his mother's milk might be. And he started to feed. Now, even more amazing than that, the sun was shining on his face. And I think that's what he was distraught about in the first place. This van had curtains on the windows. And I had expected the mother would pull the curtains shut. It was the kind of curtain that sunlight would still come through, but it wouldn't be that bad. And I expected her to pull the curtains shut. But she did not do that. Instead, she took her hand and cupped it like this and held it about 3 inches from her child's face. And she held it that way all the way back to Bariloche. She did not want her son to suffer the full brightness of the reality of the world in which they lived. She wanted her son to be well-fed and comforted. And if ever there was a baby that was well-fed and comforted, it was that child. Now that experience touched me again because it convinced me again of how thankful we should be. That we have a God that is like this mother. We have a God who knows what distresses us. He already knows what distresses us. He's aware of the hungers we have. This God we have is just like that mother who then offers us the foods that we need in order to find satisfaction and comfort in the midst of the distress that we face. How thankful we are to have a God like that, whose food is not only just available all the time, it's available exactly and precisely when we need it. And that is exactly what happened in that scene. This young little baby was enjoying the food that truly satisfied while living in the comfort, the shadow of his mother. This is the life we have as Christians. This is the life we have and the life for which we should rejoice and be thankful. For we do live in the shadow of the divine love. And the divine love knows we need what we need before we even realize ourselves what it is we need. And so there it is. This is another reason to be thankful. But we have to ask a question at this point. And it's a question that comes to us from the gospel here about this prodigal son and about ourselves. Why do we wait so long? Why do we struggle so hard against the reality of God's food that is available to us this very moment? Why did the prodigal son wait until he was down to nothing? Wait until he was totally without hope? Why did he wait that long? Why do we wait that long? Why do we struggle and rage against our reality? Why do we struggle and say, oh, this is bad, oh, that is bad, and we whine and we cry just like a baby? Why don't we pay attention to the food that is right there and open our hearts up and begin to take it in and enjoy it in comfort and peace in the midst of all the chaos around us? Why don't we do that? One simple reason. It's called pride. You see? Human beings are some of the most prideful animals we know of. We will struggle to the last minute to prove that we know what is best. We will struggle until the last day to prove that we know how to operate our life and what our best choices are. We'll struggle until there's no struggle left in us. How silly that is. We don't need to do that. And I encourage all of you as Christian brothers and sisters to wake up, come to your senses, just like it says that the prodigal son did. Come to your senses and realize that there is food in abundance. You just need to go back to God's home and take that food in and not try to find your own food in a world that has no food to offer you. So then there it is. That's why we are able to rejoice, because we know this is the kind of God we have that looks after us and has His food ready the moment and the time that we need it. So today then, in preparation for our communion, I want to leave these two visions with you. The next time you feel distressed, the next time you feel like the world is all going to hell in a handbasket, as we say, the next time that occurs to you, stop and remember. Lap, lap, lap. Wing, wing, wing. Choo, 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 swallow. God's love is there. 100 years from now, 1,000 years from now, all this stuff that we worry about, not going to be here anymore. It's going to be gone like the wind. All these things that we're so anxious and so worried, oh, this is going to happen, oh, that's going to happen. This world's been here over 13 billion years, and God has been here longer than that. And God will still be here, and God's love will still be here, and it will always be available to us. Remember that. Don't ever forget it. And secondly, put your stubborn pride away. Quit trying to figure out your own life. Quit trying to figure out your own way. Quit wiggling and crying against the reality that you see. Quit all of that. The food is there. Open your heart. Take it in. And enjoy every drop of it. And be shadowed by God's divine love in the midst of the horrors that we face. So these are the two visions I will share with you today. And I hope that they will enable you then to have your own personal answer to the prodigal son's question when he said, "My father's hired servants have food to spare, but here I am starving." Let your answer be, "Not me, I'm not going to starve anymore. For I have all the food that God provides me, and I am thankful for it, and that's how I shall live my life." Amen.